Welcome to Spirit River Podcast. Here today, once again from the beautiful Louis River. And what a delightful day it is. I get to talk to an old friend today who unfortunately moved away from Portland, Oregon. But we were recently connected through Don Paris, who introduced me to the UKI, Universal Quantum Interface. And his number one guy is Phoenix Aurelius. Hi, Phoenix.
Hi, Petra. It's so great to reconnect.
Oh my goodness. I have been following your career from a distance, and I didn't realize that you knew Dom Paris and Ilona Selke, who have been in my life for the last few years through a book that both Ilona and I were published in. And so when your name popped up, I said, Phoenix, Phoenix. I mean, there are not a lot of people that are Phoenix Aurelius.
That's too true. Well, yeah, and Don and I over the years have become really good friends, and we're over here managing the Chio aspect of his business and looking to take over the SE5 when he gets out of the industry and reselling U keys and doing all of the things with IDF. It's definitely one of my major passions. So I'm so glad I caught in that on that episode that you guys did
Yeah.
and absolutely loved it. And I was like, oh, so great to see Don. And yeah, you guys both shined like crazy.
It was such a wonderful interview, and I'm so excited about the movie coming out.
Oh yeah, frequency. Yeah, in so many ways, I kind of look at that movie as a pivotal point for people to really like the mainstream to kind of get on the bandwagon and start to see how much the subtle dimensions actually play a part in our overall reality. For too long have we been just locked into the physical plane, and now getting into the mainstream and seeing how things are going to shift as a result of this, I'm really excited about it as well.
Yes, and a lot of people are curious now. I mean, I got into biofeedback in 2008, and it was kind of difficult to get through to people with what it was. I have the indigo biofeedback.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and you're exactly right. Like so many people ended up just kind of, getting into things at various different time frames, and then we've seen it in the industry like start to increase in popularity, and now it's like we're at the 99th monkey, there's just one more that's got to get on board before
Yeah.
it disseminates out. So,
Well, I'm not even going to read the intro because I'm just going to ask you questions. I'll take my glasses off. And
sounds great. Yeah.
we didn't really prepare for this, so we're just going to flow.
Yeah, well, and that's more than all right. I think organic conversations like this actually turn out better and have a better value anyway. So,
Yeah. Well, I did read up on you because I Googled you, and what came up was this word that I had to learn to pronounce, spagyric alchemy.
that's right.
And that's how you started at a very young age.
I did, yeah. Sitting at a computer lab in high school, I had dislocated my ankle 3 times in a 90-day period. So like every 30 days, I was basically dislocating my ankle from doing skateboarding. And as a 16-year-old, all of my friends were skateboarding. And so it was like, well, to start doing something, I spent a lot of time out in the woods. And one day I was sitting there and looking around, and it dawned on me, like, I don't know any of these plants. I don't know their curative properties. I don't know their names. I don't know their ecological functions. I know nothing about them. And so sitting there with that staring me in the face, and those being my new friends, all of the green ones, all of the trees, all of the plants that were growing in the rivers and the streams and the animals that would pass through. Of course, I knew the names of most of the animals. I didn't know the names of all of the plants and the trees and other things, or what they did, or how I could interact with them in a meaningful relationship. Just like you and I have a meaningful relationship where we can talk and share ideas and other things. I didn't know how to have that type of communion with the plants at that time. And so I went into the computer lab in school, and this was in the days of 256K dial-up, so things took a lot longer to access information in those days. But I would go online and I would try and find out the very best ways of working with various herbs and plants. And I came across this document called, it was called How to Make a Spagyric Tincture. And it was a flow chart from a very big alchemical group that was extraordinarily popular in the United States in the 90s and early 2000s called the Philosophers of Nature. And they had a French faction first called Le Philosophe de la Nature, where in France they were teaching all of the same curriculum since, like the late 1970s. And then they finally found a translator that was able to bring them over to North America. And his name, he's a Quebecer named Patrice Malaise. And he ended up doing all of the translation work for Jean Dubuis, who came over from France and taught these things. And so all of those English materials kind of originated out of that. And it was a simple flow chart of how to make a spagyric tincture. And I used that for a couple of years. And it wasn't until a few years later when I was working at a cafe and I had an entire elixir bar with tons of herbs and other things, and I could custom blend up tonics and beverages and all sorts of things for our clients there. That one of my herbalist friends came in and she had studied herbalism, been an herbalist for, some 10 or 15 years at that point. And she said, "How is it that your products are always so potent? Like, I only see you put like 3 to 5 drops of your tinctures in there, but they are so potent. How is it that you're getting that potency?" So she took me out to lunch and we kind of compared notes. And she was like, "Oh, what you're doing is actually part of the alchemical tradition. And the largest alchemical school in the world was right here in Salt Lake City. It might still be open." And it got me looking into alchemy as an entire form because, in those days, Merriam-Webster and all of the different dictionaries in English didn't have what the term spagyric even meant in there. So when it said how to make a spagyric tincture, I did the same thing as you. It's like, how do I even pronounce this word? I was calling it spagyric, for a long time and to figure out what the hell it even meant, really. And then I just took all of that wisdom up with me. And of course, being a really young kid, I had to get some of my friends to buy little bottles of Everclear for me from the liquor store and, my older friends, of course. And so that I could be able to make these tinctures. But then I'd go up into the mountains and I would make these different tinctures and set up a big campfire and do all my calcinations and do my leaching projects with water that I distilled from the creeks and stuff and just ended up getting into that work. And when I found out that alchemy was the actual parent of Spagyria and that Spagyria was this entire medicinal art form, the medicinal application of the alchemical pathway of Western Europe, I got really turned on by that. And it's just been a fire that's been burning inside of me that I've never been able to extinguish, nor would I even want to extinguish it at this point. It's just become part and parcel with what I do and how I live my life.
Wow, that's so beautiful. So, what made your tincture so much more potent?
Yeah, so in the alchemical philosophy, everything is imbued with a soul, a spirit, and a body. And this is true whether we're talking about a plant or a mineral or an animal or a human being or even a thought. Everything has a soul, a spirit, and a body to it. The body is going to be the form. The spirit is the bioelectricity that causes it to be animated and gives it its life force. And the soul is the healing intelligence that it carries across with it. And so, like, for instance, when we're making a plant tincture, the color and all of the volatiles, all of the essential oils that are inside of that plant that get extracted with the alcohol or with our solvent, all of those are part of the sulfur of the plant. And so in the alchemical tradition, we not only extract things similar to the way modern herbalists extract things, but then we also take the salts, which is to say all of that spent herb, and we burn it down to an ash, and then we leach all of the water soluble minerals out of that ash content, which in the vegetable kingdom, most of that is potassium carbonate. And then we combine them back together and we react them for a great deal of time until they perform a number of different chemical processes. And inside of alchemy and inside of the spagyric tradition, they were pre-scientific, so we didn't have chemical terms when these things were created to know exactly why they were as potent as they are. But now we have modern phytochemistry that we can kind of compare and contrast against, and essentially the term is that they become iatrochemically activated by the addition of these salts. There's alkaline deprotonation and heat-based deprotonation and esterification and all of these different kind of technical phytochemical processes that essentially equivocate to far more bioavailable, already like combined with all of their precursors, so that when you take them, they're directly soluble in the bloodstream. They can bypass through sublingual absorption, they bypass all of the digestive mechanisms that normally decrease the potency of herbs. And because they're 100% bioavailable and bonded with a base or a potassium ion, they circulate through the system for up to 24 hours. So, in layman's terms, the difference between an herbal supplement and an equivalent item of spagyric pharmacopoeia, like an herbal tincture and a spagyric tincture, are that the spagyric tincture leaves all of the things that are not important for the healing potency of that plant behind. And then simultaneously, we react that and esterify that and protonate that or deprotonate that with these alchemical processes, and they become infinitely more bioavailable and infinitely more potent and stick around in the body for a much longer time. So that's kind of the short of it.
Interesting. So I'm a little bit of a I meddle a little bit. I mean, I have
Very good.
entire porch full of plants. I mean, definitely all the culinary plants, for kitchens and
Right.
such. But then in our backyard, we have stinging nettle. And so
Mm.
do a lot of different things with stinging nettle. But my I love some of the tinctures for allergies and such. Just yesterday, our manager from the RV park was here with horrible allergies, and I gave her homeopathic and some stinging nettle tea. And it cleared up immediately. In 20 minutes, she was just fine, whereas before she couldn't even speak. It
Yeah.
was,
Oh man, like that's experience after experience after experience with people who dive into it, you know.
yeah. So the spagyric, I am so curious. So you're teaching classes on this mostly online, is that correct?
And in person. So even next month, August 11th, I have a live immersion training here in West Virginia.
Mm,
And we'll actually be teaching a slightly more advanced level. It's only level two, so it's not like it's very, very advanced, but we go into how and why we perform essential oil distillation in the alchemical and spagyric traditions, and how we distill tinctures and how we separate out the higher soul from the lower soul of the plants, and how we make a number of different items of pharmacopoeia. So I do teach live, and most people actually love when I teach live because every class, I'm a really kind of crazy and unique individual in that I can read energy extraordinarily well. And this, that comes at a great cost. That was developed primarily by traumatic intelligence of scanning the room to determine if I'm safe and being able to read subtle cues from growing up in a environment with a tremendous amount of conflict. But after you get rid of the trauma, you're still left with a gift. So my brain is still wired in this way that allows neurotransmitters and neurons to be able to go down pathways they otherwise wouldn't, which allows for a lot of extra perception that I don't necessarily see in a lot of other individuals.
mm,
And with that, one of the tools, along with my psychic training, studying with the Berkeley Psychic Institute and a number of different individuals early on in my career, was to take a look at the crown chakra and see what symbols and images are hanging out in the crown chakra. And this has just become a very innate practice for me so that I get an idea of where people are actually at and what types of thoughts they're thinking. And when they stumble over a word, or when they give me an interesting gesture, or have some sort of body movement that doesn't seem congruent with what it is that they're saying, I can look at their crown chakra and I can see what is driving that particular thought, or what is driving that particular behavior or body language, or pause in their speech, or whatever the case is. And then that gives me a great deal of clarity about what they're doing. So half the time, I don't really even need people to speak, just as long as they're holding clear images in their crown. And in a classroom environment as a teacher, this helps me a great deal, because now I can see where I might be talking about a particular subject, and I can just scan the crown chakra. And if people aren't there, then I can rediscover it and talk about it in a different way that allows for the information to come through. So almost everything that I say, there's like three different ways that I say it, sometimes more, in order to allow the information to sink in. And there's something really special about that in a teacher, where students are like, wow, that shows a mastery of the information, or that was delivered in a way that I needed to hear it. It's not like your experience of school, where you have a math teacher who doesn't know why we do the math. They just know how to teach the math. It completely disconnects the subject from its real world applications. And so I'm able to speak in that way. So I have a very unique way of teaching. But people love to be present for in-person teachings. But I have tried so intensely just to do online stuff, especially since moving out here to West Virginia, because making it out to our neck of the woods is a very difficult thing. It's really more of like a pilgrimage than it is just traveling, because the nearest airport is about 2 hours away, and the best nearest airport is 3 hours away. And there's no Uber or taxis or buses or anything that will shuttle you into this part of the country. So you have to get a rental car and drive out here, and then stay on site and either camp or, find limited housing availabilities, rentals and things like that. So teaching out here has presented some problems in terms of needing to travel so far, but people are still doing it like crazy. But I really, really am getting back into online teaching, so that I can take the transmissions and the data and the information that I have, and be able to find ways that I can transmit it to other individuals. So, I mean, I've taught online and in person collectively, at the same time for over 20 years now, but really getting back into a lot more of the online teaching these days.
So you live in the forest.
I live deep in the forest. Yes, very, very deep in the forest. We are about as far as you can get into central Appalachia, dead heart of Appalachia, very deep in a broadleaf forest, and lots of roaming waterfalls and moss and mushrooms and animals and all the things. And those are our buddies. Those are our friends and the folks that keep us company, because the nearest people are miles and miles and miles and miles away from us.
So I find it just really interesting. I like to work a lot with elderberry. Like every year, make a tincture.
Mm,
And when you were speaking about spagyric alchemy, um, my thoughts immediately went to this. Okay, so I'm gonna infuse my elderberries in the alcohol, and then I let it sit for a couple of weeks, and I pray over it. I do Reiki and all my little things, my little magical things that
that's
I do
right.
over my tincture, and then I take what is left when I sieve it out, when I strain
Hmm.
it, and I then burn this, and I put back the
Hmm.
into the actual tincture.
So you could put the ash back in. Um, that's kind of like a more starting method. But the thing is that that ash, depending on that plant, or depending on the tree, in this case, elderberry tree, those tap roots could be getting into aluminum, lead, mercury, nickel, different types of heavy metals as well. And those might actually find their way into that ash. So one of the things that we do is to take the ash and leach it with water. So you basically, calcine everything to an ash as fine as you can. You grind it up with a mortar and pestle, and you keep hitting it with high heat
Mhm.
until the ash doesn't have any more color to it. It'll be pale gray or
Yeah.
white even.
Yeah.
And then you would bring that to a boil in water, and then filter that water. That's going to keep what doesn't pass through the filter is the ash. What does pass through the filter is all of the water that actually has all of the prime mineral corpus, in this case potassium carbonate, trapped inside of it. And so once we evaporate out that water, we're left with this mineral matrix, this pure white mineral matrix. And after a few more processes of cleaning that up so that it's a complete purity, then we can add that back to the tincture. And then there will be no heavy metals to it. There will be primarily potassium and carbon that get added back. And those react very, very nicely with the tincture. And there are a few things that you need to know about how to circulate them and how to do a few other things in order to get, ideal results or the types of clinically pure results that we get over here. But the basis is exactly the same. So it takes a long time. It takes a lot of patience. It adds about 10 times as much work than what you would do just over making an herbal tincture. But now the difference is huge, Petra, because your dosage is now about 5 drops as opposed to maybe 5 tablespoons full.
Mhm.
So we're talking very, very small dosage, a massive increase by orders of magnitude in potency, which make it so that your medicine lasts a lot longer, and it's also significantly more bioavailable and more potent. So when we talk about, oh, I've got the first signs of cold or flu, taking a few drops of this will knock it right out. If that's if it's a physical imbalance, it'll knock it right out. And yeah, that's kind of the difference there is that both methods will work. One works with less material and a spagyric gets better as it gets older, whereas an herbal tincture has a shelf life of about a year, maybe a year and a half. A spagyric tincture ends up getting more and more matured, just like a fine bottle of wine does. A bottle of wine from the 1800s when Napoleon was around is going to be very matured and very unique in comparison to the same grape, maybe even the same region that it was made out of, the same yeast, same traditional things made today. You'll taste two totally different things in that aged wine versus the new wine. The same thing is true with the spagyric tincture. They mature, they age, and they get better and more mature with time. So there aren't any expiration dates with the way that we produce medicines over here. So there are a lot of benefits, but the drawback is a lot more time up front making the remedies.
Mhm, mhm. So it would be just
That was
easier
kind
to actually buy it from you.
Yeah, until you learn, yeah, it'd be easier no matter what, but I guess that depends on how much disposable income you have. You know, if you have more time than income, then it's easier to make it. It's cheaper to make it. If you have more income than time, then yeah, buying it definitely makes more sense.
So you obviously you have this very cool website when people can order online any of these tinctures, and then your classes. So your next class is in August. I mean, I am really intrigued to come to North Carolina and do one of these classes with you and sleep in a tent, And I've always wanted to study herbs. I did a pretty big deep dive with essential oils and
Hmm.
have been meddling with those since 1990. And then Young Living came up in 1994. That kind of started slowly, and you know,
Right.
companies like that that have pretty good oils, and then you heard the horror stories of what happens to the oils when they're being purchased and sort of tampered with, and so they can make more oil out of, for example, lavender or frankincense, and they
Yeah.
alcohol and other things, and the potency is pretty much lost. So what what is your goal now with your next phase of your life? You're turning 40 next
Mhm.
month, youngster.
Yeah, exactly. I'm still
Doing this
just a baby, as it were. Um, So yeah, this whole next phase of my life is actually around everything that it's a culmination of everything that I've done over the last 20 years, but putting it all together. And so for me, one of the biggest things that I've been working on is creating a whole new system of medicine. And what I realized in doing it was that it's bigger than just a system of medicine. It's actually an entire lifestyle. It's a way of living. It's a way of engaging the world. And so initially, we were calling this Aurelian medicine. But now we've just decided to move away from the term medicine and to refer to it as Aurelian philosophy. And the whole concept is that we are multidimensional beings. Alchemically, we have a soul, a spirit, and a body, but we look at all of those as living in a multidimensional tapestry, each of four different dimensions. Sometimes these are known more colloquially in New Age and metaphysical circles as the physical plane, the emotional plane, the mental plane, and the spiritual plane. But we actually in alchemy and in the Western esoteric tradition call these slightly different things. We call them the physical plane, which is the same, the astral plane, which actually deals with all electromagnetism. And then we deal with the causal plane, which deals with scalar waveforms as well as quantum data and sacred geometry. And then and also harmony with cosmos through geometry. And then we also relate to the spiritual dimension as well. And so the soul, the spirit, and the body exist within this interwoven tapestry through these four dimensions. And identifying where the imbalance originates for an individual is really quite important. So just today, for instance, I was doing a lot of this work, and I used the SE5 to be able to determine and to utilize analysis to determine where these imbalances sit for an individual.
Um, uh,
But we
well,
basically,
Phoenix, do you want to talk about the SE5 and explain to our audience what that even is? Because most people probably have no idea what the SE5 2000 is.
yeah, well, I can use very plain terms and it still might go over people's heads. So listening out there, if that's you, don't worry, you're in good company because that's true for most people. So the SE5 is what is known as an intrinsic data field analyzer, and the version of it that exists right now are the SE5 1000s and 2000s, which are essentially the same piece of equipment. They just have slightly different add-ons to them between the 1000 and 2000 series. But these were developed by Don Paris, who you had on the show. And so watching the interview that you had with Don talking about the U key and other things like that will help people parse this together a little bit better. But an intrinsic data field is very, very similar to Rupert Sheldrake's concept of a morphogenetic field. But it's been talked about in a lot of different ways throughout all different cultures throughout history. The concept is that energy also, just kind of like you have a physical fingerprint, and if you put your physical fingerprint on something, it leaves a print or an imprint on that thing. Um, Everything leaves an energetic signature in the causal dimension that basically tells us about everything that it contains. So, like, for instance, I could do an intrinsic data field analysis for you, and we could, you could tell me like a list of different things that you could have eaten last night, with only one of them being true. And I'd be able to utilize the intrinsic data field equipment to be able to analyze which of those things actually sits inside of your quantum fields, your scalar field, and then be able to tell you what is there. But by that same token, I would also be able to determine like what the wellness of your soul and your spirit and your body is. And let's say that there was an imbalance in your body in the astral dimension, we'd be able to go in and interface those different levels and then go deeper and deeper and deeper, taking a look and detailing out, say, mitochondrial wellness or basic cell organelle wellness or anything that you can think of. If it exists as a thought, it can be analyzed using intrinsic data field technology. And so it's a very deep area of study and even a deeper area of practice, but it's basically a way of being able to sense and to calibrate and numerically analyze various different levels of the aura or levels of the energetic emanations, total energetic emanations of the individual, whether that's in the physical, astral, causal, or spiritual dimensions, it really doesn't matter. And so we utilize this tool because it goes so far beyond the modern laboratory analytical methods that are possible. And we even use it for chemical analysis over here of a lot of our tinctures and stuff, to be able to determine what the potency is and, what types of um, chemicals have changed nature through the spagyric process and what it is that we're dealing with so that we can interface with phytochemists and modern chemistry in a way that they don't just look at us as complete quacks, which they try to anyway. When you talk about being an alchemist, if people don't roll their eyes like that, they really don't have much context for it. And so it's a very alluring term that a lot of people don't realize has a very particular strong play in the Western esoteric tradition. And yeah, it's kind of front and center in terms of our importance of humankind to master this before we can move to our next state of collective evolution. Alchemy will be one of the things that needs to be integrated very well. So we utilize alchemy and IDF over here very, very synonymously and in a very intermeshed way in order to not only analyze people, but materials and ecological wellness and agricultural sciences and all sorts of other things. But yeah, again, with the SE5, there's nothing that you can think of that cannot be analyzed.
Wow.
But also the SE5 is just an extension of your own psychic faculties. So if you are unclear or your psychic channels are blocked or they're not working properly, the results you're going to get are only going to be as clear as the psychic perception that the individual has in the first place. And so it's a great tool, but it also takes a decent amount of discipline and training to be able to use it with absolute precision.
Yeah, it took about 2 years for me to learn the indigo because it has 500, 600 programs. So it was
Exactly.
pretty
Yep.
involved. You had to study some anatomy and get a coaching
Yep.
license, and so that you even know how to talk to people about this and explain what's on the screen. And you enter the data, birth date and time of day they're born, and where they were born, and like a lot of things that matter. And with the U key, the universal quantum interface, it's a little bit easier to use than the SE5, right?
Yeah, it is. So you can't perform analysis with the U key, but you can benefit from the balancing aspect. So what's cool is that once we have an analysis performed, we can create custom what are called broadcast protocols in order to broadcast scalar wave forms to the individual that imprint that data into their data field. And inside of Aurelian philosophy, the intrinsic data field corresponds to the soul of an individual, whereas bioelectricity or electrical, piezoelectric and electric manipulations like acupuncture, for instance, acupressure, um, being able to do marma therapy, different types of biofeedback also utilize frequencies and frequency-based medicine. All of that interacts with the spirit, and then actual biochemicals and molecular biology works with the body. So, do we have the basic building blocks, for instance, like proteins and amino acids and peptides? Minerals, fatty acids, so on and so forth. All of those kind of correspond to the body. So when we send IDF balancing broadcasts, it puts data into the field of the individual. And if they have adequate bioelectricity and signaling capacity through their bioelectric channels, which can be looked at either as fascial planes in Western terminology or as meridians in Chinese medicine or as nadis in Vedic terminology, they're all kind of perceiving a very similar dynamic. um, what we're capable of doing is being able to influence the spirit, the soul, and the body of that individual through this data because of their bioelectric signaling capacity. And so we can create a lot of different balancing broadcasts to help to bring things in their field that are out of balance back into balance through non-physical means and non-local means. So I could be anywhere in the world. You could be in Australia or Washington or Germany, or you could be on planet Mars. It really doesn't matter because scalar information is not limited by time and space in the same way that, say, taking a remedy is limited by time and space, or altering your bioelectricity is limited to some degree by time and space. So we can approach these things at great distances and through time by utilizing scalar technology, which is just one of the aspects of quantum scalar science that we now understand. We now have physics enough to understand how and why these things work. But yeah, the U key allows a person to receive the benefit of these balancing broadcasts. And the real difference between an SE5 practitioner like myself and somebody who's getting a U key is that a practitioner like myself is not just utilizing generalized tunings that apply to everybody, which are oftentimes what you're going to find through the universal quantum interface, but rather the very particular points of imbalance that we have identified over here, and then we create a custom protocol for that to just address the imbalances that are detected. So it's kind of like the Yuki is a more generalized approach, and the SE5 is a much more personalized approach, but they both make good use of quantum scalar balancing, or what can also be referred to as intrinsic data field balancing.
Mhm. So, can you briefly explain what scalar waves are?
Hmm. So scalar waves they exist as part of a quantum structure. And really, the way that I can introduce this best is through our four dimensions. We have the physical dimension, the astral dimension, the causal dimension, the spiritual dimension. Let's just focus right now on the middle two, which are going to be the astral dimension and the causal dimension. In the astral dimension, what we're dealing with are waveforms and frequencies and electromagnetism. If something has an electromagnetic signature to it, meaning that it can be read or depicted in terms of hertz, then it exists in the astral dimension. And most of our waveforms exist in the astral dimension, and they exist as these different types of waves that we can see that move in a longitudinal fashion. Scalar waves exist in the causal dimension where the causal and the astral meet, actually. And they are what are known as transverse waves. So instead of moving longitudinally, they move this way. They move forward and backward instead of up and down, would be a good way of visualizing that.
Mhm.
So scalar waves essentially are semi-causal, semi-astral structures, or where the causal and the astral meet, that are able to take quantum information and be able to take data, is kind of the technical term, and to be able to relate it in a waveform that is able to interact with the electromagnetic longitudinal waves. And that's why I was saying, if we don't have bioelectricity, which is part of the astral dimension, it's part of those longitudinal waves. If we don't have those inside of the body, we can send data to it all day long, and the data won't stick or be carried properly. But if the person has sufficient bioelectrical resistance and those longitudinal waves are working right, now the transverse waves kind of weave in and out of those, and they're able to transfer at the same time. This sounds maybe a little hokey to some people, but I would ask you to think about the way that an SMS or a text message or a phone call or any digital data gets sent. It
Mhm.
gets sent through electric signaling, which is to say that you need to have some sort of electronic instrument to be able to carry this, but the data is carried inside of that wave, meaning that you write a message and you hit send. Your phone is taking all of that information, reducing it to an amount of data that can then be wirelessly sent to either a transmission tower or a satellite, and then turned into an electromagnetic frequency that is able to send that back to a receiving signal to your phone, to the recipient's phone, that then unpacks that data, turns it back into a text message, and there it is. But the way that it was sent was through the electromagnetic waves, either from the tower or from the satellite. The exact same dynamic is happening with an SE5. The only difference is instead of digital data that needs to be unpacked and repacked and, sent through the waveform, what we're doing is just sending the scalar tuning and relying on the bioelectricity of the individual itself to pick up on that signal. And but the dynamics scientifically of how it works are almost exactly the same.
So there is a scalar program on my biofeedback device. And the other day I watched a YouTube on a gentleman, I can't remember his name now, but he had a Tesla coil and he was
Hmm.
holding, he's been working with scalar wave energy for a really long time. You probably know who it is. And he held a light bulb that was still in the packaging and the light bulb lit up. Do you remember that YouTube? Have you seen
I
that?
don't remember
I have
a
to send
particular
that to
video,
you. It's really good.
but I have
And
seen a lot of things like that, even with my own eyes and with people that work with Tesla coils. And so I've been able to experience that for myself. Yeah.
so we have a device in the house that's connected to our Chi builder on four corners. It's called the REM369, and it has scalar
Hmm.
waves and Tesla coils on each corner of the Chi builder, Chi sleeper. And you sleep on this mattress, and then you're hit by from four corners with these scalar waves, which is really cool. It's fantastic. They're getting some really good results with that. I'm looking forward to the med beds being released. I mean, there's going to be technology coming out that we're just, yeah, it's going to be mind-boggling, the things that are going to be invented. But I felt always so sorry for Nikolai Tesla of what happened there, of how he was sort of disarmed from doing anything further with his work. Because by now we would be energy independent if he had been allowed to continue his work.
That's exactly right. And, really, he wasn't, I don't want to say that I feel bad for him in a way because he was alive at a period in time where the cycles of the consciousness of humanity just were not prime for what he had to offer.
Mm,
But he was a way shower for all of us in this time period to pick up his ideas because if it was available in the 1800s, it's just as available, if not more so now. We
mm,
just need great minds that are willing to pick up where he left off and be able to bring this into kind of our present paradigm because where we're working right now is still trying to get out of the moray or the social paradigm of predation
mm,
and of inequality, morality, basic concepts of the human organism that are creating the illusion of separation between us and nature. We're still very much so embedded in that paradigm. It's loosening up and shaking up every day, but we're at the tail end of that cycle of consciousness and the beginning of a new cycle of consciousness where people are going to inherently understand their intrinsic oneness with all things. And that's going to change the way that we think about sciences. That's going to change the way that we think about resources. It's going to change the way that we think about a lot of things. And I think most of us are actually already picking up on these things. I know that you and your husband are very much so on that same train, like you very, very conscious, very aware. We're already doing a lot of that early work here at the very beginning of this new cycle where we're doing our part in this process. And all it is getting enough critical mass behind it to where other people can see these things and interact with these things in a more tangible way and release a lot of their traumas, release a lot of the kind of lower instinctual aspects of our being that keep us tied to greed and predation and blame and hate and shame and guilt and all of these lower vibrational aspects that are tying us to a much lower frequency way of living. And so I'm very excited that so many people are getting back onto Tesla's train of thought and starting to work with these things. And of course, CIA and FBI and these other three-letter agencies are, trying to still quelch all of these opportunities from popping up.
Mhm.
and they keep their eye very closely on what's happening because, like Tesla mentioned, he could split the split the Earth in two, just like the core of an apple with nothing but frequency.
Yeah.
And he was quoted as having said a lot of very important things, which won't mean much to people unless they understand the quadrivium in and out. But he was like, the secret to the universe is understanding three, six, and nine. And once you dive into the quadrivium and you understand that there's a unification of science and art and number and higher order mathematics and everything through geometry, that's where we really begin to understand the nature of harmonization of cosmos and cosmic energy and so on and so forth. Until we actually grasp that, doesn't matter how much we perceive, we don't really understand much about the nature of the universe. The quadrivium really are the sciences that help us to understand how number, which could be referred to as mathematics, how geometry, astronomy, and music are all the exact same science, just recapitulated in slightly different ways. Like music is always done through ratio, whereas geometry is done through form and angles and relationship, and mathematics is done primarily through equation and addition, subtraction, basic arithmetic. And astronomy is the living way that we can take a look at all of those things and understand those relationships on a macrocosmic level. Once we begin to see at that level, that gives us what we need in order to move forward as a culture. And so, ironically, these things were well practiced and taught extremely well over 2,000 years ago by Pythagoras and continued on by Euclid and others in ancient Greece. But we lost all of that information during the Dark Ages because it was suppressed and highly guarded amongst the intellectual elite through universities and has been ever since. And lately, it turned, from like roughly about 1870 onwards, it turned into just a memorization of facts and equations and other things, and all of the spirituality and all of the psychic awareness and the cosmic truth aspect of it was completely eliminated from the curriculum, and it was brought exclusively into the physical domain where it's like, okay, now I can measure the angle of a triangle. Great. What application is that in real life? See, but all of those things actually are spiritual and psychological truths that are reflected through the entire cosmos through divine proportion and through these geometric relationships. And once we start to pick back up on that, everything that Tesla was doing will be innate for even like a 3-year-old child. Like they will understand what Tesla was doing innately regardless of whether they can build a Tesla coil at that age or not. The understanding of it is seeping its way into our earth and into our consciousness, into the consciousness grid or the intrinsic data field of our planet extremely, extremely quickly. So yeah, it's a cool time that we're living in, but
Amazing.
not so great for Tesla.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure he's already back. So
Yeah, exactly. If not, then maybe he just needs another vacation before he says, "Yeah, I'll
I
go
need
to that destination."
sorry, I need another 1,000 years. Give me a break. That was really tough coming to Earth. We're all volunteers. I sure am glad you're here to do this fantastic work. I'm convinced you were an alchemist in a previous life, Phoenix, probably in Egypt or somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know
Mm.
100% about all of my past lives, of course. I don't know that I want to. There's some sort of beautiful intrigue and mystery there, but the the thing that I can say is that whether I share these past life memories or not, my soul currently is on a trajectory where all of that information from these past ages is extremely relevant now. And I find myself, the reason why we call the Phoenix Aurelius Research Academy a research academy is because that's what it is. I have to go through and I have to research and filter through millions of data points from the past, and I have to reassemble what it is that we lost from the past and when we lost it from the past in order to gain context for where it is that we're going. You know, there's that common phrase in English that says, unless you know where you have been, you don't really have a trajectory of where you're going. And I find that that's really true today is like so many things, like I mentioned with the quadrivium being taught, 2000 years ago, ubiquitously to people, that type of wisdom is so necessary in our modern age. But in order to reclaim that wisdom, I have to go back 2000 years. I have to see through the eyes of those individuals and I have to experience what they experienced so that I understand it intrinsically so that I can relate it to a modern audience and say, here's how and why this is important, and here's what we do, and here are some of the applications that we can use of this. And once they learn it, then they can go and take it and find many more applications for it. And that's what's, in my opinion, my kind of sole purpose here. That's what I'm meant to be doing, is to look into the past and find solutions for the future. And so whether I was any of these people in the past or not, they're all relevant to me in the present. So
Exactly. I feel exactly the same way about that. Well, 2000 years ago, the Essenes were quite the herbalists. They had a lot of amazing.
touche.
So the Native American Indians, there was so much that was lost there. Oh my goodness. It's a good thing you're channeling and you're bringing psychically, that you're such an empath and psychically gifted that you're able to tap into these things and bring them back through.
Yeah, well, I think that it's really helped me in a lot of regards because you can only capture so much through the intellect.
Yeah.
The intellect is a great tool, but it can't solve everything. And in fact, it can't solve life's biggest problems. But when we tap in with the soul, which is the root of our word psychic, P-S-Y-C-H in Greek, ancient Greek, if we translate the letters to modern English letters, it's P-S-Y-C-H-E. In English, we pronounce that as psyche, but that was known as psyche in ancient Greek. And that literally is a word for the soul. And so when we talk about our psychic impressions, that's like being able to perceive from the level of the soul being a recursive and holographic fractal of the monad, of the source of all of creation. And so when we perceive with that level, then we're not just trying to get intellectual information. We're definitely picking up on higher orders of holographic and fractal truth that originate directly from the heart of God or from the source of all creation, the monad, however you want to refer to it. There's no right or wrong terminology there. It's just different perspectives on the same force. But yeah, I think that it's really helped me an enormous amount to tap in on that level so that I don't have to run my intellect into the ground.
Yeah, my grand guru, I don't know if you know that I was in India for a long time and studied and had a guru and all of this. But my grand guru, Sant Kirpal Singh Ji, he always said, "As man, know thyself as soul."
Hmm.
Mhm.
That's exactly right. That's our more or less eternal aspect of ourselves, and much better to live out of that frame than it is to live out of the frame of identity of the physical manifestation we're in and the physical brain that comes along with it. Beautiful tool, but it gets misappropriated 90% of the time.
Well, you are in the perfect environment. I am so happy that you're doing all this extraordinary work for people on this planet. And I will certainly look into getting elderberry tincture from you this time. I'm going to compare. I have a neighbor
Very good.
who has a really big elderberry tree, and I have to sneak up there, and they don't know what it really is. It's just sort of an
Yeah.
ornament tree, but I have no idea. Well, thank you so much. How do people get a hold of you, Phoenix?
Yeah, so the best way to keep in touch with me and what I'm doing is to go to my website, phoenixaurelius.org, just my first name, last name.org. That'll take you to my website. Sign up for our newsletter because that's where we announce just about everything. These days, we're not really on social media very much. Every once in a while, like for our workshops, we will run an ad or something. We don't respond to any questions or comments. We don't engage with social media really much at all through YouTube or anything. We don't answer comments there. It's just a brain drain and it takes so much time. So even though we do have a YouTube channel, we do have an Instagram page, we do have a Facebook page, you're not going to find most of what we do there. You'll find it through our email stuff. And that's just because I'm at a point in life where those aspects of social media seem hollow and completely infiltrated by artificial intelligence, and they don't really speak to me very much anymore. It seems to be more of a low vibrational place where people are sharing their oh, woe, me stories.
Yeah.
And when they're not, I'm already on the level where people are sharing their success stories and whatever else. And I don't love the abuse of ego that is rampant on those programs. So we just don't, we've chosen to just walk away entirely and to not pay attention to that. So stay tuned to my website and what we're doing. I have a bunch of great classes and class content coming up digitally. So people from all over the world can take classes and learn what it is that I have to offer. Everything from very simple, basic things all the way to extremely advanced mathematics and lab practices and all sorts of different things, everything in between, with a major focus on how to heal ourselves and how to heal our collective as humanity to get to the point where hopefully we can move forward in a much more beautiful, much more coherent way. So website, phoenixaurelius.org.
Yes, and I will be getting the Yuki from you. So
Wonderful.
yes, I'm ready to start using the universal quantum interface and getting people's pictures and their names and in there and see what
Oh, man.
happens. The miracle stories we can write about. So
That's right. Oh man, and they are so multitudinous that I have all of my clients, all of my wellness clients and research clients pick that up because I
mhm,
can make, an SE5 practitioner like myself can perform analysis and make custom tunings and send it to your Yuki so that you can use that on yourself or other people or whatever else. So there's so much functionality in that one instrument. It is absolutely amazing, and it's the best user level um type of instrumentation that exists for benefiting from intrinsic data fields. So I'm glad that you're picking one up, and
picking
hopefully
up.
some of your listeners will be
Yeah.
very interested in that too. And all of those are available on our website as well.
Do you ever do trainings on the SC5?
I do. In fact, I've already got one up. It's how to perform Aurelian analysis using the SE5 because I use the SE5 in a very different way than Jan van de Est or Don Paris or many of the other different types of users around there. I've developed my own system, my own theory, my own practice, my own everything. And so I do teach that, and I have a course out already, but I'm going to be teaching even deeper levels here very soon. And those are just available as courses on our Teachable page, which you can access from our website,
Okay.
that you can already go and sign up for and learn how to use and other things like that. There's a growing number of international users who've already learned how to do this, and they're finding extraordinary success with it. And again, I think the reason is that, when you have a headache, we're not just sending a broadcast with the tunings for headache or migraine. We're actually finding where that headache originates in its multidimensional causation and then approaching it that way. And so it's so customized and so personalized that we see extraordinary results with it. And yeah, if people want to learn how to do that, the course exists already, and even further information will be provided here very soon.
Fantastic. Phoenix, oh my goodness, this is so wonderful to see you again.
You too, Petra. I have nothing but love and respect in my heart for you, and I'm so glad that you reached out. This has been a brilliant blast from the past, and thank you so much for having me on today.
Have a great day. And to my audience, thank you for joining us and wish you all a marvelous day. Ciao, ciao.